I never thought I would end up telling this kind of story. I always figured my life was going to be simple: work hard, build a future, love my wife, raise our kids, and die a good man. But life doesn't always go the way you think. Sometimes it takes a sharp turn and throws you into a storm you never saw coming. That's exactly what happened to me. I met Emily when I was 24. She was the kind of woman who made a room feel lighter the second she walked in. She had this smile, soft, real, and a little shy. I remember thinking I'd be the biggest fool on earth if I let her walk out of my life. We got married 2 years later. I wasn't rich or anything special, just a guy who believed that if you love someone enough, you can make it work. And for a long time, it did. We built a small life together in Ohio. Nothing fancy, just a modest house with a porch, a dog, and plans for a couple of kids one day. I worked at a construction company. Emily started out as a nurse, then moved into administration at the local hospital. We weren't perfect, but we were happy. At least I thought we were. The first signs that something was off came slowly. She started staying late at work more often. At first, I didn't think much of it. Hospitals run long hours, and Emily was dedicated. But over time, the little things began to stack up. She stopped laughing at my jokes. She started sleeping with her phone face down. She wore perfume even when she said she was just running errands. I tried to brush it off. I told myself not to be paranoid. We'd been together for 10 years. You don't throw suspicion into something you've built for that long. But the truth has a way of scratching at your mind until it breaks through. One night she came home late again, around 11. She looked different. Her hair was slightly messy, lipstick faded, like she'd been out having a good time. When I asked her where she'd been, she said she and some coworkers went out for a drink after a long shift. I wanted to believe her, so I did. I told myself, "Don't be that jealous husband." But deep down, something inside me shifted. A week later, it happened again. Same excuse, same tired smile. I started paying attention. I checked her car mileage. I noticed her phone lighting up with messages she wouldn't let me see. I wasn't proud of it, but one night while she was in the shower, I looked at her phone. The messages were deleted. Every single one. That was all the confirmation I needed. I didn't confront her, not yet. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to understand who he was. Because there's always a he. You can feel it when another man enters your life, even if you haven't seen his face yet. I started asking around quietly. Emily's coworker, a woman named Linda, dropped a hint without realizing it. She mentioned a guy named Jake, a younger physical therapist who had joined the hospital about 6 months earlier. Emily and Jake worked great together, she said with a grin. That was all I needed to hear. I looked him up online. And when I saw his picture, tall, fit, maybe 30, I felt my stomach drop. He was exactly the kind of guy a woman like Emily might start noticing after years with someone like me. I didn't hate him, not yet. I just hated the way he made me feel, small, replaceable, old. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe. I wanted to shake her awake and make her tell me the truth. But instead, I just lay there in silence. Because deep down, I knew, if I pushed her, I'd hear something I could never unhear. So I waited. I needed proof. Not rumors, not suspicions, proof. And when it came, it didn't come from her. It came from someone I least expected, a co-worker of mine named David. David worked maintenance at the hospital where Emily worked. One afternoon, he pulled me aside at lunch and said, "Hey man, I don't know if this means anything, but I saw your wife the other night. She was with some guy in the parking lot. They looked close." My chest went cold. "What do you mean close?" I asked. He hesitated. "Like hugging." Then they kissed. I didn't want to say anything, but I figured you'd want to know. That was the moment my world cracked. I remember that night like it was burned into my memory. After David told me what he saw, I just sat there, staring at my sandwich like it was going to give me answers. I didn't say a word. I thanked him quietly, told him not to mention it to anyone, and drove home in complete silence. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard they turned white. The whole way, my mind was running in circles. Every laugh she shared, every late night, every "I love you." That suddenly sounded like a lie. When I got home, Emily was already there. She was in the kitchen, humming, acting like everything was perfectly normal. I stood by the doorway, watching her move around, and I swear, for a second, I almost convinced myself that maybe David was mistaken. Maybe he saw someone else. But then she turned around and smiled at me, and I could see it in her eyes. Something was gone. The warmth that used to live there wasn't there anymore. She came over, kissed my cheek, and said, "Hey, you're home early." Her voice was light, cheerful. I forced a smile. "Yeah, slow day at work," I said. Inside I was boiling, but outside I stayed calm. That's the thing about betrayal. You don't explode right away. It eats you slowly, one quiet second at a time. Over the next few days, I watched her like a stranger. Every time her phone buzzed, she'd look nervous. Every time she said she was working late, I could feel the lie hanging in the air. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to catch her in the act, because once I did, there would be no going back. The following Friday, she said she had a late meeting at the hospital. I nodded, told her to drive safe, and watched her pull out of the driveway. 10 minutes later, I got in my truck and followed her. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I kept my headlights off, staying a few cars behind. She didn't go to the hospital. She went downtown, parked behind a small cafe, and waited. About 5 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up beside her. And then I saw him, Jake. The guy from the hospital. He got out, smiling, and leaned into her car window. She laughed, reached out, touched his arm. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. Then he opened her door, and she stepped out. They hugged, and for a moment they just stood there, holding each other like they hadn't seen each other in years. Then she kissed him. It wasn't a quick kiss. It was long. Familiar. The kind of kiss that tells you everything you need to know. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I didn't crash my truck into his car like my blood wanted me to. I just sat there in the dark, watching the woman I loved betray me like it was the most natural thing in the world. My hands were shaking. My throat burned. But something strange happened inside me. It wasn't rage that filled me. It was silence. Cold, deep silence. After a few minutes, they went inside the cafe. I sat there for maybe half an hour, staring at the empty parking spot, until I finally started the engine and drove home. My mind was numb. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove. When Emily came home later that night, she smelled like coffee and cheap perfume. She said, "You're still up?" I nodded. "Couldn't sleep." She smiled, kissed my forehead, and went to shower. I watched her walk away, realizing the woman I married no longer existed. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I wanted her to keep lying. I wanted her to feel safe. Because the moment she thought I knew nothing, that's when I'd start planning. And believe me, I planned everything. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Emily was still asleep beside me, her breathing soft and even. I stared at her face for a long time, wondering how someone could look so peaceful after doing something so cruel. The way she lay there, you would think she was innocent, like nothing had happened. But I knew better. Every beat of my heart reminded me of what I saw. When she finally woke up, she smiled at me and said, "You're up early." I told her I couldn't sleep. She kissed me, poured herself some coffee, and started talking about her day like everything was fine. I nodded, listened, pretended to be the same husband she'd always known. But inside, I was somewhere else. That day at work, I could not focus. I kept replaying that moment in the parking lot. The way she looked at him, soft, trusting, like he was her world. I had never seen her look at me like that in years. It hurt. It burned. But the more it burned, the clearer my mind became. I wasn't going to explode or beg for the truth. That's what she would expect. I wanted her to underestimate me. Over the next week, I played my role perfectly. I laughed at her stories. I kissed her goodnight. I even surprised her with dinner one evening, just to keep her guessing. I needed her to believe everything was normal so she wouldn't see what I was doing behind the scenes. I started gathering information. I followed her a few more times, kept my distance, recorded what I saw. I took pictures, her and Jake together at a hotel, holding hands in the hospital parking lot, even one of them kissing in his car. Every image felt like a knife, but I kept going. Because this wasn't about pain anymore. It was about control. I talked to a lawyer, just to understand my options. I learned that if I played it right, I could come out of this with everything, the house, the savings, and her reputation shattered. But I didn't want to just destroy her legally. That would be too easy. I wanted her to feel what I felt, the slow, quiet agony of losing everything you thought was safe. One night, I overheard her on the phone while she thought I was asleep. She was whispering, giggling, saying things like, "I can't wait to see you again." And, "He has no idea." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. When she hung up, I lay there, staring into the dark, my heart beating steady, calm, dangerous. The next day, I went to see David again. I told him what I'd seen, and he nodded slowly. "You sure you want to handle this alone?" he asked. I told him I didn't want anyone else involved. This was between me, her, and the man who thought he could take what was mine. By the end of that week, I had everything I needed. Photos. Dates. Times. Proof. And a plan that was starting to form piece by piece in my head. I was going to invite Jake and his wife to a small dinner party at our house, under the pretense that it was just a casual get-together for hospital friends. Emily wouldn't suspect a thing. She'd believe it was my way of meeting her co-workers. And Jake? He would walk into my home without knowing that I already knew everything about him. That night, I lay in bed beside her and whispered, "How about we host something next weekend? Maybe invite some of your friends from work?" She turned to me, surprised but happy. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course," I said, smiling. "It'll be nice to finally meet the people you spend so much time with." She kissed me, said she'd take care of the invitations, and rolled over. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the calm before the storm settled deep inside me. I wasn't sure how it would all unfold. I just knew one thing: when the night came, it would change everything. The week leading up to that dinner felt like living in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Emily was buzzing with excitement, talking about decorations, food, and how the team would love it. I smiled when she smiled, nodded when she talked, and played the part of the proud husband. Inside, though, every heartbeat counted down to the moment she would finally see what I'd become. I made sure everything looked perfect. The living room was spotless, candles on the table, soft music playing. I wanted the place to feel warm, safe, like home. Because that was the trap. People never see the knife coming when it's wrapped in kindness. The guests started arriving around 7. A few coworkers came first, laughing, talking, holding bottles of wine. Then Jake walked in. I recognized him immediately, even though I had only seen him from a distance. He was younger, maybe early 30s, with that easy confidence guys get when they think the world owes them something. And right beside him was his wife, Hannah. She looked sweet, shy, like someone who trusted him too much. I could almost feel sorry for her. Almost. Emily's eyes widened for a split second when she saw him, then she covered it with a smile. "Oh, you made it," she said, her voice a little too bright. Jake grinned, shook my hand. "Thanks for having us, man. Emily talks about you all the time." I returned the smile. "I bet she does," I said quietly. He didn't catch the edge in my tone. None of them did. Dinner was easy at first, small talk, laughter, polite conversation. But under the surface, tension coiled tighter with every passing minute. Emily kept glancing at Jake, trying to be subtle. Jake looked nervous, his hand brushing against his wedding ring like he wanted to take it off but couldn't. Hannah, though, was different. She was paying attention. Every time Emily spoke, Hannah's eyes flicked to her husband. Something inside her was starting to stir. Halfway through the meal, I stood up with my glass. "I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight," I said, smiling. "Especially the people who make my wife's long nights at work more bearable." I looked straight at Jake when I said it. He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. Emily's smile twitched. "You know," I continued, "marriage is funny. You think you know a person inside and out. You share years, memories, trust. But sometimes people surprise you. Sometimes they show you a side you never expected." My voice was calm, but the air in the room changed. Emily whispered, "Tom, what are you doing?" I looked at her and smiled. "Just talking, sweetheart." Then I turned back to the table. "And sometimes those surprises, well, they come from the people sitting right across from you." The silence that followed was heavy. Jake's wife looked from me to Emily, then back again. She knew something wasn't right. I reached into my pocket, took out my phone, and placed it on the table. "Funny thing about phones," I said softly. "They remember everything, even when people think they've deleted the truth." Emily's face went pale. "Stop," she whispered, her voice trembling. But I didn't stop. I opened the gallery, turned the screen toward Hannah, and pressed play. The first image appeared, Jake and Emily, together in the hospital parking lot, kissing. Gasps filled the room. Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. Jake stood up fast, knocking over his glass. "What the hell is this?" he barked, but his voice cracked. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Tom, please," she said, reaching out, but I stepped back. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You've had your say. Now it's my turn." The room fell into chaos. Hannah slapped Jake across the face, screaming words I couldn't even make out. He tried to explain, stammering, but there was no way out. Emily collapsed into her chair, crying, whispering my name. I stood there, watching it all unfold, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. But what none of them knew, what even I didn't fully realize then, was that the night wasn't over. Not even close. The real shock was still coming. The moment after everything exploded, the room turned eerily quiet. Only the sound of Emily's sobs filled the air. Hannah had already stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Jake stood frozen, shame written all over his face, but still too cowardly to speak. I stood there in the middle of it all, feeling a strange calm spreading through me, like the storm had finally passed. Emily looked up at me through her tears. "Tom, please. We can fix this. I made a mistake. I laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. "You made a mistake? That's what you call months of lying, sneaking around, kissing him in parking lots while telling me you were working late?" My voice stayed calm, but every word came out sharp as glass. "You didn't make a mistake, Emily. You made a choice." Jake finally found his voice. "Man, listen, this wasn't supposed to happen." I turned to him, and he froze mid-sentence. "You don't talk to me," I said quietly. "You walked into my life, my home, and you took something that wasn't yours. Now you deal with what comes next." He looked pale. Emily tried to grab my arm. "Please, Tom, don't do this here," she whispered. But it was too late for that. Everyone already knew. Her coworkers would talk, word would spread, and by morning, the perfect image she had built at work would be gone. I didn't even have to raise my voice to destroy her. After everyone left, I sat alone in the living room. The candles had burned low, the food untouched. Emily sat on the couch, shaking, trying to speak, but I didn't look at her. I just said, "You should call someone. You're not staying here tonight." She started crying again, whispering that she had nowhere to go. I didn't respond. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. "You made your bed," I said. "Now go lie in it." She gathered her purse, eyes red, and left without another word. I closed the door behind her and just stood there, listening to the quiet. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt empty. A few days later, Hannah reached out to me. She wanted to talk, said she needed closure. I agreed to meet her at a small diner outside town. When I saw her, she looked different, stronger, colder. We sat across from each other in silence for a long time before she finally said, "Thank you for showing me the truth." I nodded. "I didn't do it for you," I said. "I did it for me." She smiled faintly. "Maybe. But you also freed me." We talked for hours, two broken people trying to make sense of what was left. Somewhere between the coffee and the silence, something unexpected happened. We laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because we were both too tired to keep crying. Weeks passed. Emily tried calling a few times. I didn't answer. I heard she left town, maybe started over somewhere else. Jake lost his job after the scandal hit the hospital. Hannah filed for divorce. And me? I went back to work, back to the simple life I had before everything fell apart. But I wasn't the same man anymore. Then, one evening, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a single photograph of Emily, standing in front of a small house with a baby in her arms. The note beneath it said, "He looks like you." For a long time, I just stared at it, not sure whether to believe it or not. My chest felt tight, my hands shaking. I didn't know if it was true. I didn't even know if I wanted to find out. Because after everything she had done, I still couldn't tell if what I felt was love or just the ghost of it. I folded the photo, placed it in a drawer, and whispered to myself, "Let it stay buried." But even now, some nights when I can't sleep, I think about that picture, the baby's face, the timing, the possibilities. Maybe it was Jake's. Maybe it was mine. I'll never know for sure. And honestly, maybe that's the real punishment.